Well, we're especially pleased to have Susie Wilson with us today. And I think we are all in awe of Susie's ever-present smile and cheerful attitude. And she's going to share with us a little bit about her life with Osteogenesis Imperfecta.
Oh, you did that right. Good job.
So,
He practiced.
OI is a rather, well, it's a rare but a very challenging condition, and we're just amazed at how you keep so busy and all that you do. So please, welcome, and look forward to hearing from you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Glad to be here. So I was born in 1968. I was born in Greenwich, Connecticut. And the day I was born with 2 broken legs and a broken arm. And of course, my parents didn't know that I had OI. I was diagnosed about 5 hours after I was born. Luckily, there was an orthopedic doctor who had just transferred from Columbia Presbyterian, who then came to Greenwich Hospital and was heading up their orthopedic group. And luckily, he had treated people with OI before, so knew about the disease, and thank God for him, because if it hadn't been for him, my life could have been totally different. So what is osteogenesis imperfecta? So osteogenesis imperfecta is otherwise known as brittle bones disease. So it's a collagen disorder. And so collagen, I don't know if you all know, but it affects every part of your body. And it connects to the organs. It can connect to muscles. It can connect to, obviously it helps make your bones strong. So I could drink 800 gallons of milk a day. You know, you could give me all the milk you want, but my body doesn't absorb that vitamin D, collagen to help keep my bones strong. So if you think of a brick wall, and you know how you've got the bricks and then you've got the cement in between the bricks. So your body knows how to produce the good collagen, which produces the really strong bones. Whereas my body, because of that gene defect, it constantly is building a broken brick wall on top of a broken brick wall. So I'm constantly in fear of fracturing. I fracture very easily. So OI was discovered, believe it or not, by the middle of the 18th century. It was discovered in 1716 in an infant. That was, and by the middle of the 18th century, there were 30 cases identified, and it was a doctor that actually came across it. So they figured out, in today's world, with the technology, they figured out what the gene is that causes, they figured out the gene, but they haven't figured out what causes that defect. So neither of my parents, there's no history of OI in my family, so I consider myself a mutant. All my friends and I, we make fun of each other. We're all like, we're mutants, this is great. But if I was to marry somebody who had OI and we were to have children, it would be 100% chance, most likely, that our children would have OI. So it was just a gene defect between my parents that created that defect. I've had 46 fractures over my lifetime so far. Hopefully no more, but you never know. And I've had 11 surgeries. Most recently was in 2023 when I broke my femur in 2 spots, and they had to go in and put a rod in, and then the rod got infected. So it was a long haul, but luckily it's all good now. I've also fractured my skull. I've fractured my arms. And I've had, as Lee Health diagnosed it as, elective brain surgery. So Mike, I love your expression. So in 2013, I was getting on my old van, to go to work, and I was thinking about 1,000,001 things. And I was in my manual wheelchair, and I put the front wheels on the ramp, and I pushed the button, not thinking that I wasn't fully on the ramp. So the wheelchair flipped back in our paver driveway, and I ended up with a subepidural hematoma, and 2 skull fractures and a broken arm. And Lee Health Hospital coded it as elective brain surgery instead of emergency surgery. So that was quite interesting trying to fight that battle and that bill. But I've worked in the healthcare field for over 25 years. I worked in the hospital side, representing the hospital and fighting insurance claims. So I became really good at fighting the system, learning all their excuses on why they can't pay bills or why they couldn't pay our insurance claims, and representing the patients. So when it came to myself and my own medical bills, it was quite easy to just fall into that, okay, now I need to learn to be my own advocate over that time. So I consider OI not to be the worst disability in the world, because I am able to luckily think, and I am in a wheelchair, but I don't really consider that a hindrance. I was born this way, so I don't know what it's like to be able-bodied and not have a disability, so I guess that's how I look at life. So, Sue, if you want to do the next slide.
Yep. I just have to go back and forth to let people in, so that's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's just one person.
So there are 15 different types of OI. I'm a type 3 and 4. Forgot about that slide, thank you. And so the OI Foundation is located in Gaithersburg, Maryland. There's 25 to 50,000 people in the United States with OI. So it's a very rare disorder. And it, like I said earlier, it is a collagen 1, type 1 defect. So like I said, it does affect your heart, your lungs. So I'm not going to die of a fracture. I will probably die of heart or lung complications, because everything, with me being so small, everything is so compact in there. And with the scoliosis that I have, that affects how it curves around my organs and everything. So, but if anybody would like to learn more about OI, feel free to go to the OI Foundation's website at www.oif.org, and there's all kinds of information on there. I'm a past board member of the OI Foundation. I also am a support group leader here in Florida for the OI Foundation, and I have presented at our national conferences and regional conferences throughout the United States. So this is a picture of my parents. My dad, he was such a supporter, such my go-to. He was so creative in adapting and modifying things throughout my life. And my mom, some of you may have remembered meeting my mom, because she was a member here at St. Michael's as well. She passed away in 2016, and my dad passed away in 1996 of a massive heart attack. He died at age 60, and that was really hard for me, because he was my cheerleader. He was always the one who said, you're not gonna give up, you're gonna be the little engine that could, and just keep on going, and we're just gonna make things work. So I am thankful to my parents. So up in the upper left corner is me a couple of days old after coming home from the hospital. And then in the right corner, so in 1976, because I had quite a few fractured femurs, what happens is over time your bones bend. And so because I had so many fractures, they had to go in and straighten out my legs with rods. And back then, in 1976, they decided it was easier to do rodding surgery on one leg. And what that means is, what they do is they literally, not to gross anybody out, but they take the bone out, they break it in 4 spots, and then they put a rod right through the femur, and then it would heal. So 1 week they did that one leg, and then 2 weeks later they did the other leg. And so I was in a body cast from May until the end of August. And of course, back then, in 1976, that was like the hottest summer on record. And of course, we didn't have central air conditioning.
Oh.
So being in a body cast, you know, from your toes literally up, as you can see how high it is. So on the weekends when my dad didn't have to work, he and Mom would take me out on the boat, and it was great because they could put me up in the front of the boat, and it would be such a nice cool breeze, so it would help cool me off on the hot days. And then, you know, once I got out of that, the orthopedic doctor said, oh, it'd be great if you could get Susie into physical therapy, and, you know, you really need to build a pool. And my parents were like, well, that's great, Dr. Worcester. We live on a 3rd floor apartment building. We really can't build a pool in our apartment. But my dad, being my dad that he was, knew they belonged to Larchmont Yacht Club. And my dad and Mom were both into sailing. So they knew sailmakers. And so my dad came up with the idea of a sailmaker making this canvas tank kind of thing. And my dad, being creative that he was, had taken metal rods and built parallel bars for our bathtub. And so the lining would come up, and he had adjusted it so that the parallel bars could go at any height depending as I was growing. He could raise or lower them, and then I could practice in the bathtub, walking back and forth and building up the leg muscles. My mom was always worried, though, that eventually that the canvas would break and we'd have like this major flood off the 3rd floor of the apartment building. But thank God it never broke. But I was really thankful that my dad. So I did start out with physical therapy when I was young. And I don't know if any of you remember, I did walk with a walker for a number of years. But in 2004, I had a bad car accident. It wasn't my fault. But the guy had rammed into me at 60 miles an hour from McGregor Boulevard at A&W Bowl. And I broke the femur in 2 spots, and the orthopedic doctor at that time put a rod in my femur, and we didn't realize it took a year and a half, and I kept trying to bend the knee and bend the knee and bend the knee, and spent a year and a half with physical therapy. And what turned out was that he had put too long a rod in my femur, so it had gone into the kneecap area. So that was preventing me from bending my knee. And by the time we realized that, he swapped the rod out for a smaller rod, but I had so much scar tissue in there, even with an elbow scope, he still couldn't get all the scar tissue out. So, you know, my mom was upset because I had given up on the walking, but for me, it just wasn't worth risking another fracture and another serious surgery, because that was a 2-year recovery. So I've just decided that the wheelchair is easier and it's safer in my eyes now, in a way, because I can control one less fracture, hopefully. So these are just some pictures of me kind of growing up. The upper left was me in college. I went to Manhattanville College, lived on campus all 4 years, loved it. Was great living in a dorm in a basketball hallway with all the tall guys, and being the shortest one in the dorm, I could always say, hey, I can't reach, you know, and they'd help me reach things. This is when I was at about 4 years old on the right-hand side, out on their Triton. Mom and Dad loved boating and tried to get me into boating as early as possible. And then, as I said, I speak at the national conferences. So my mom's arthritis got really bad. So when we would go to a national conference, we would rent her one of the scooters. And with me with my manual wheelchair and the thick carpeting that the hotels have, I could never keep up. And that's really common when you go to an OI conference. You see all these people in electric wheelchairs zooming all around, and the people in manual are like, hang on, wait for us. So what we would do is we would make a train, and we would hang on to the back of somebody with an electric wheelchair, and then all the manual chairs would attach, and then you'd kind of pull everybody around. And so that was just something to show. And we'd go to a restaurant, and there'd be like 25 of us, and the restaurant would be like, oh my God, invasion of little people. Where did they all come from? And you know, we'd all be like a caterpillar snaking in and out of the restaurant. So, kind of fun. So that was my graduation from college. So I was determined to make my graduation ceremony. In high school, about 4 days before I was to graduate high school, I was in a car accident, again, not my fault, and I broke my leg, and I knew right away when I broke my leg that I was going to miss my high school graduation. And back then, they used to treat me, not so much surgery-wise, but in Buck's traction. So I don't know if any of you know what Buck's traction is, but so here's, say, for example, is a femur, and your femur is going to be straight, okay? But when you have a fracture, sometimes what can happen is you get space in between, and it can get out of alignment, so it's not straight. So what they did back when I was growing up was they would put you in Buck's traction, so you'd have this splint thing around your leg, and at the end of the splint would be a rope, and at the end of the rope would be a 1 pound or 2 pound weight that would hang over the edge of the bed, and then you would use sandbags to put around my femur in this case, and you would lie in bed for basically 16 weeks while the stupid thing healed. So, and then you would have to, and the way they positioned the sandbags would be the way to help kind of put the leg back in alignment. So when I was younger, I always knew the fracture right away, and I knew immediately in my head, okay, I'm now gonna have to miss out on, and I'd run through my head of whatever I was missing out on. So when I missed my high school graduation, I also missed my prom. And my best friend who was gonna go with me as my date, Matt, he was like, you know, if you didn't want to go to the prom, you could have just told me you didn't have to break a leg. And then he was like, well, instead of us getting a limo, we'll just rent an ambulance and take you in your hospital bed. So I got to college and I was like, all right, I got this. And I made it all 4 years without a fracture. And 4 days before graduation, I broke my femur. And I knew I wasn't going to make my college graduation, and I couldn't believe it. And Manhattanville was a small school, so there were only about 150 students in my class. And I had developed a handicap awareness program because Manhattanville kept saying in the Barron Book of Colleges that they were 99% accessible. And after my freshman year, I knew they were not 99% accessible. And I wanted to prove to them that they weren't accessible. So what I had done was I put together a 4-part program. And we rented wheelchairs. And I put together a committee, and they were all able-bodied. I was the only one disabled at the time on the campus. And I had given the committee members, we would go out the night before, and I would give them different tours of my life on campus. So I would say to them, okay, let's go to the cafeteria. And, remember I had my walker, so I was only 3 feet tall. So I'd go to the cafeteria and I'd fit underneath the counter and I'd say, I want macaroni and cheese. And, everybody in the cafeteria would be like, we hear a voice. Where is the voice coming from? We hear macaroni and cheese. And I'd have to go, down here. But then trying to carry a tray while wheeling a wheelchair or with a walker, how do you carry a tray of food to the table? Going to the library, of course, when I was doing research papers, the book I wanted was always on the top shelf. How do you reach that? I wanted to be a computer major. Well, there was a flight of stairs to go down. So I had them try to pretend that they were going to be a computer major. So we had different scenarios so that they could experience what it was like. And one of the other part of the programs was I had a professional wheelchair basketball team come. And I lived in the basketball hallway. And these guys were great, and we'd all become friends. And I was like, hey, you guys, I want you to participate this week and play wheelchair basketball. And they're like, oh, this is going to be breeze, no problem. We're just going to beat this team really well. And I'm like, okay, but you're going to be in wheelchairs. Hope you're going to see these 6-7 foot guys, in these wheelchairs. And they were manual wheelchairs. They weren't sports wheelchairs, And the professional team had the sports wheelchairs. Well, by the time you get to one end of the court, professionals already, at the other end shooting baskets and everything. So it gave me a good experience. So when I broke my leg, excuse me, I knew right away. And the students all rallied together, and 80 of them rented a school bus and brought me my diploma to the hospital. And the dean of students and the president all came and gave me my diploma. So that was me. I made the front page of the Greenwich Times newspaper that weekend. So that's me in Bucks Traction getting my diploma. So these are some of my friends within the OI community. Some of you might remember Amber in the upper right corner. She lives in Cape Coral, which is great because, like I said, there's only 25 or 50,000 of us in the United States, so it's really hard to find people that live close by, and because it is a rare disease. Mom and Dad were great, but they can't always relate to what I was going through because they didn't have it. I didn't even know about the OI Foundation till after I graduated from college. And I put in a Google search and in AOL thinking, they're not going to know what this is. Sure enough, it came up, and that was my first time ever finding out about the OI Foundation. Excuse me. I attended my first national conference in '96, and what a great experience to be able to go to a national conference and meet people with my same disability. And at the conference, what they do is they take egg crate cartons and they put them down, and they would put a piece of plywood on top, and they would make that the buffet table so that we all could reach it. So all the able-bodied people then had to bend down and feel like they kept saying, this is too low, and we'd all be like, yes, we can finally get the food without asking for help or anything because it was at our level. So the foundation really goes out of their way to try and make it accessible. And in the lower right corner, the picture of the big group, that's our support group here in Florida, which I co-chair with Gail Bunker. And we're really proud of ourselves because there's about 80 people on our mailing list, and not that all 80 people come, but at least we've been able to reach out to people. And in the middle there on the upper top tier of the pictures, that was just taken recently in Atlanta, Georgia. and that was a man, Ross, who attended his very first conference. It was a one-day regional in February, and he was just blown away. It's an amazing experience to attend. So it was kind of fun to meet him and his girlfriend. And in the upper left corner was my best friend, who did pass away due to heart complications. And then in the lower left corner is Susie Richard. And she's known as Bad Susie, and I'm known as Good Susie. So anything that Susie Richard would do that I didn't approve of, she'd be like, of course Good Susie wouldn't get a tattoo, or get drunk at a bar, or, do wild, crazy things. So it was we always had this competition of who could do what.
So do you ever switch roles?
We tried, but I failed. But what they did challenge me to was, I know not to go out when the winds are higher than 80 miles per hour, because
So do we.
Yeah.
because we had it was a Hurricane 1 category up in Washington, D.C. And Jamie, up in the upper left corner at the time, mind you, she was only in a wheelchair. And she drove a Dodge minivan. And she was the president of the OI Foundation at the time. And we had a board meeting that weekend. And she's like, Susie, you're not canceling your flight, you're going. And my mom was like, I can't believe you're leaving from Florida to go up to a hurricane. This is insane. Mom, I got this, no worries. So, flew up there, got there actually a day before I went ahead. And Jamie decided instead of staying at her house, we're gonna stay at the hotel where the board meeting was. So we went to the grocery store because she said, if we lose electricity in the hotel, we might not be able to get down. So we better take some food and stuff. So we had all this stuff to unpack in the car. So here I am with my walker, 3 feet tall. And here Jamie is about 4 feet in her wheelchair. And so we get to the hotel. I'm like, okay, and the wind's starting to pick up, no big deal. And it's about 30, 40, maybe 50 miles per hour. And we're starting to unpack the car. And I'm like, all right, we got this. Well, back then, they didn't have the power button on the back lift gate. So the only way you could shut the trunk was with a rope. Okay? So
50 miles.
So Jamie's like, oh, I got this. I'm like, well, let me help you. So Jamie goes to pull on the rope to shut the trunk. The next thing you know, this wind gust comes, and she's swinging off this rope back and forth. So I'm like, oh my God, Jamie, I gotta help you. So I go to grab the rope. Well, the next thing you know, both of us are swinging off the back of her car on this rope. And this person walks by and he's like, do you girls need any help as we're swinging? I'm like, yes, please. So luckily he held the rope and we both climbed down and he helped us bring the stuff in. So that was my first experience, really being outside. So then later that day, Susie Richard met us at the hotel and she's like, I wonder what it's like to walk in 80-mile-an-hour winds. I said, I'm not doing it.
No.
And she's like, you are such a wimp. And that was enough to determine to me that I was not a wimp. So she and I went outside. She had crutches and I had my walker. I took one step out and that wind picked me up. And it was like, I couldn't stop. And thank God there was somebody able-bodied who was hanging out with us. And he went running after me. And literally, I crashed into his knees and he held me down by the shoulder and just was like, get back inside. So they have challenged me at times.
Lucky you didn't break something.
I know. As you may or may not know, I do volunteer over at Ding Darling. I've been doing that now for about 4 years. I reached over 500 hours this year, so that was pretty exciting. And I've worked really closely with Tony Westland, who you may or may not know, who's the head ranger till the end of this month. Sadly, Tony's retiring, but she and I have worked really closely together to try and make the Bailey Track and Indigo Trail more accessible. And now that I have this wheelchair, I'm finally able to do Indigo Trail, which I never was able to go out there before with my manual. So it's really been a neat experience. So one thing I did do after my mom passed away was I modified my home. So I'd always lived in an able-bodied home where everything was at your height. And when my mom passed away, everybody was really worried about what was gonna happen to me. And I kept saying, oh, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. Well, about 3 months after she passed, I noticed that there was water on the floor. And I thought, oh, I guess the refrigerator's leaking. So I called Home Tech. Well, lo and behold, I didn't realize that the hose behind the refrigerator had broken. And so it had been going on for about 3 weeks. So when he went to go move the refrigerator out, the floor had warped up underneath the refrigerator and ripped out. And so when he moved it, we saw all this mold behind the refrigerator and on the floor in the cabinets. And he was like, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but you're gonna have to redo your kitchen. And I was like, oh, that's not what I was planning on. But I think it was God's way of telling me, we're now gonna make your house modified. So we had to redo the whole kitchen, and as you can see, I lowered the sink area on the right, you can see. And I left the dishwasher at the same height, so then that can be like for your level height for the countertop, because everything else has been lowered to about 32 inches. And then on the left, you can see the cooktop. I can get my wheelchair underneath it, and it's a induction cooktop, so it's easy for me to cook. And then the oven, you'll see a picture in a second. So this is the sink area, and as you can see, I put the handle in the front instead of in the back, so it's a lot easier for me to reach it.
Of course.
And then in the picture on the right, I don't know if you see that white switch there. That's the toggle switch, and it does all the under-the-counter lights because that's hard for me to reach. So that turns them all on and off.
Switch here.
Thank you, Bill. And then the silver button right next to the white button. Thank you, Bill. That's the garbage disposal button because I couldn't reach that either. So with my contractor, we arranged it so that I could reach both of those buttons to make it more accessible. And there's the cooktop showing an example of how I can cook. And then it's a Bosch oven, and so I bought that brand purposely because the door opens to the side so I don't fall in the oven as I'm cooking. And it just makes life a lot easier when you can put things in by the sides and down and out and over.
Like a microwave.
And then I don't know if any of you have ever heard of a rubbish shelf cabinet, but I can't use the upper cabinets normally. So this is a product that you can get at Home Depot. So it's that stick on the left with the hook is how I'm able to hook onto the cabinet in the center there, as you can see. And I'm able to pull down the unit, and then you can see on the far right how the unit drops down, and it allows me to put other things in that cabinet, containers and cereal and canned goods and things like that. And this way I'm able to utilize the upper cabinets in my kitchen.
How does it go back up?
I take the hook off, I lightly tap it, and then it goes back
Oh, I see.
automatically on like springs. And then since I was gonna redo the kitchen, a lot of my friends, and Kimball in particular, said to me, you should move downstairs, because I have a 2-story house. And she's like, why don't you take the master bathroom and make that accessible? And I kept saying, no, I'm used to being upstairs, I'll just stay up there. Well, I I finally admitted to people what I was doing upstairs. I had a shower bench that went in half in the tub and half out of the tub. And since my feet couldn't touch the floor, I had taken a red bucket that I turned upside down and put that in front, and I was using that to keep my feet on. So when I told my contractor, how much would it be to redo the master bathroom? And he's like, well, you're upstairs, why? So he's like, what do you mean you have a red bucket? What do you mean you have this bench that goes in and out? So he went upstairs and he was like, this is not safe when you're living by yourself now that your mom's passed. So he came downstairs and we evaluated, and this was the final product. And we took out, there was a huge walk-in tub, which was there before we even moved in. My mom never used it. So I ripped that out, and I had him build, as you can see, a bench that's the same height as my wheelchair. And then you can see how my feet can go on the bench, and I just slide right across. So the wheelchair's far enough away that it doesn't get wet, but it allows me to take a shower and do everything on my own. And then in the sink area, you can see that we lowered the sink, and again, I put the faucet on the side for me to reach, and my wheelchair can go underneath. And then I use oxygen at night, so he was able to build the cabinet to store the oxygen tank, and he built a hole, which he drilled through my bedroom so that the tubing can go there, so really nobody knows that I use oxygen only at night, so.
You're a very good contractor.
Well, I learned a bunch from my friends going to their homes and seeing things, and then I took some of their ideas, and then I also thought about what my needs were and really combined it. And you know, so many people have said, now that you've done this project, is there anything that you wish you would could change or do differently? And there wasn't anything. I was really happy of all the things that I had thought of. So I was really lucky to be able to do that.
Well, and you're able to share that with other people to give them,
Right.
you know,
And I've
ideas
showed
about how they can
slides.
set things up too.
I've showed these slides to people within the OI Foundation. It's helped parents and young adults get ideas.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, just because I do it this way doesn't mean it's the right way. But it gives them an idea of different concepts that they can apply in their own home. What time are we at? I don't.
1/4 after.
Okay, so I'm okay. Okay, so because of all my experience of being a patient with all the different fractures, and being in and out of the hospital, I learned how to be my own patient advocate. And it's really important, particularly as we all get older, of the things that you need to be aware of, because the healthcare industry is a mess. And it's really good to have somebody with you for medical appointments in the hospital, to be there by your side. And if you are by yourself, I highly suggest anybody getting a medical alert bracelet. It's really easy to order one. I can recommend a company if you guys don't have one and need one. But it also comes with a medical card, which I keep in my wallet. But the Medical Alert Foundation is great because they give you an ID number. And the emergency EMS workers, if you are unconscious and they see that you're wearing this bracelet, they know to call that number on the back of the thing, and it has all my information in their computer system. It's always good to bring somebody with you for the appointments. Also, if you're having surgery, it's good for them to be there after your surgery to talk to the surgeon, because when you're coming out of anesthesia, you may not always remember everything that they're going to tell you. And if you're hard of hearing, if you want to ask them if you can videotape the conversation so that you can play it back. Another thing that's also helpful is to put a note at the end of your bed so that the nursing staff knows that you're hard of hearing, so that they know to speak up louder if you need that. And when you move to a new area, or for those of you that are here 6 months out of the year, make sure you have 2 sets of doctors. One where you live and then one down here in Florida. Because I was born and brought up and grew up in Greenwich Hospital, that was my home. And I worked there for 10 years before moving down here. So moving down here, it was a whole new ballgame. I didn't realize that Lee Health System has 4 different hospitals, and each hospital has their own specialty, which I didn't realize. So if you want to make sure that whatever your diagnosis may be, that you're going to be at the right hospital to treat that, so that you don't have to deal with another ambulance ride from one hospital to another hospital. So how many people in this room have their medical records that look like this?
With the cat?
Well, just the shreddedness. So organization is really key. And one thing that you can do is keep them in a medical binder. So this is my medical binder, and this is going from the day I was born up until 2003. So after 2003, I have another stack like the kitty just showed in the previous, that I have to put them all in a binder. But it's great, because if you can put them, all your records in a binder with different caps. These are just some of the suggestions I have. But again, everybody's different. But if you have a list of medications and a list of doctors and phone numbers, addresses, list of your surgeries, your healthcare proxy, if you have all of that in an envelope and you put that on the side of your refrigerator and you have to call an ambulance and you're unconscious, those ambulance people know to go to the side of the refrigerator. They're trained. And they're able to get that information and already have, okay, she's got these medications, these allergies, you know, these are her doctors with all the phone numbers, and it shows the list of surgeries so that they have your medical history. And it just really helps them. When I broke my leg 2 years ago, even though I was conscious, I was able to say to Anne Marie, hey, go to the kitchen, everything's there for you. And she could just pull that out without me having to say, oh, it was in, you know, here's all my medications in the top drawer, you know, the left side in a baggie. She could just pull that out right away. Also, I don't know if any of you have an iPhone, but there is an app called the Health ID app, and you could put all your medications, allergies, doctor information in that app, and yep.
This is the same thing as the Lee Health, My Chart,
Right,
which has a lot of the
but
same app.
not everybody has access to the My Chart. So if you're out of the healthcare system here at Lee, they may not be able to access that. Whereas if, at least with your health, the health app on the Apple phone, you're able to access that information. So one thing that when you're being your own advocate, when you go to the emergency room, you want to make sure that the hospitalist or the specialist that's treating you knows what your condition is, knows how to treat it. You'd be amazed at how many times I've had doctors that don't know what to do with me because of OI. They don't know OI. And I've heard horror stories with other people with heart conditions or lung conditions. So you really, and it's okay to be inquisitive about it. Don't just let them say, well, this is what we're doing. Ask questions. One time they wanted to give me a CAT scan with the dye. And this is when I had my hysterectomy surgery. And they made me drink, those drinks that you have to drink.
Yeah.
And they gave me it was like 2 gallons of this stuff. They said you have to drink this whole thing before you have this CAT scan. Well, I got through like the first half of the first one, and I was like, there's no way I'm gonna get through 2 gallons of this stuff. Well, it turned out, if I had drank the whole 2 gallons, that dye could have killed me because it was too much. They weren't going by my weight, they were going by my age. Well, I shouldn't be drinking 2 full gallons. I need to go by. So I always have to remind them, you gotta go by my weight, not by my age. Oh, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, I do. You're like, I've been there before. So it's really important. With x-rays, sometimes fractures may not show up. So I've had to say to them, you need to increase the density. Oh no, miss, we know what we're doing. No, you don't. You can't see the fracture, but if you increase the density, then all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, there is a fracture. It's like, my bones are so thin that it just kind of washes out.
Yeah.
So it's really important to fight for your rights. When you're gonna have post-surgery, when you go home, you wanna make sure you know what your limitations are. Everybody wants to go home. Obviously that's the goal. But if you live alone, you need to know, is it accessible? Are you gonna be able to reach things? Are you gonna be able to cook? Are you able to do your normal day things? If not, can you get help? And is it with Medicare or is it with your regular health insurance? Do you get home health care? But home health care only covers so many hours, if that. A lot of agencies now are cutting out the regular health care. They'll bring in nurses and physical therapy, but a home health aide, a lot of them are excluding those now because Medicare is cutting back on that. Sometimes it's better to go to a rehab center where you can go and get better, and then when you get home, it's only like a couple of weeks more on your own, but you're stronger and you're able to function better. At least that's what I've learned for me. Even though I hate going to rehab, in a way it's really helped me. So being discharged, I highly, 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 highly recommend getting an itemized bill. One, like I told you about my elective brain surgery, they coded the whole thing wrong and Blue Cross Blue Shield denied it. And I thought, how can they deny a brain surgery? Well, they had coded it as elective. Who in their right mind decides to wake up one morning and say, I'm gonna have elective brain surgery today, yahoo! Can't wait for this. So I had to fight it, and it took 9 months, but I finally got them to change the code to the proper code, and lo and behold, Blue Cross Blue Shield paid for it. Another thing you can also do with an itemized bill is, this happened to me at Hospital for Special Surgery. I went in, it was a 1-day surgery, and I went in and I got the bill and it had shower curtain, or shower cap. Shower cap, I never took a shower. Well, they wanted to charge $350 for the cap that they put on your head when you go to the ER, or OR. I'm like, no, you're not charging me $350, that should be part of the whole thing. Then they tried to charge me morphine. And I knew, I had never been on morphine before, and when they offered it to me, I denied it because they wouldn't let my mom see me in the recovery room, and I'd never been on the drug and I didn't know how I was gonna react. So I said, I don't want the morphine. And I said, please note that in my chart. So sure enough, I got the bill, 4 units morphine. And so I called the billing department and I said, I didn't have morphine. Oh, miss, you don't know what you're talking about. When you're on morphine, you wouldn't know. I said, if you look in the chart, it should say patient denied the morphine. No, miss, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, lo and behold, I had them research it and they came back and they said, oh. Well, what do you care? Your insurance company's already paid everything. I said, that's fraud. You can't do that. You can't put miscellaneous charges on there that people didn't have. So I was able to get them to take those charges off and resubmit. And so definitely check the bills. And these are just some ideas if you do have a problem. These are some of the products that I've used, just to give you a concept. So the left one is the shower bench that I did have in my tub, but it does work well because you can sit on it and then slide across when you're sitting down. So if you do have a tub that you can't get in and out of, that's a great product. The commode, a lot of people don't realize that on commodes nowadays, you can get ones where the arm drops down. So if you wanted to do a slide transfer from a wheelchair or from the bed, you can put one of the sides down on the commode so you can easily slide across. And then the board at the bottom is a slide transfer board. So when I first had surgery, I'm really weak, so the sitting on the board, and then you can just slide across, and it makes it easier than trying to slide across sheets and things like that. So that's my motto, the little engine that could. And it's always, I think I can, and I know I can, and that's kind of the motto I go by. That's it. Any questions or?
What's the life expectancy?
Average everybody. Right now, I think the oldest person we've got on record that they know of is about 88 years old.
Wow, good. Wow.
And it gets longer with the more advanced technology that they're doing.
What about international? Is there an international foundation, and do other nations have a better system for dealing with OI patients?
There is an international organization. They're based in Europe, and they're on a healthcare system. They have insurance, but it's the government all pays for it. There's pros and cons to both. A lot of people over in Europe, if they have to have surgery, because they don't have, they have the free Medicare care. So you have to go in line to wait for the surgery. So that's different. Or here in the United States, if you have insurance, you can just get the surgery right away. It depends on the country that they live in and whether they have the technology. Some people will fly to different countries depending on the technology and what they need. But since OI is so rare, it's hard to find doctors that know about OI.
Yeah.
But it is, the doctors are starting to learn about it. One thing that I forgot to mention was, I was lucky in the sense that I was diagnosed 5 hours after I was born. Some people with a milder form of OI, because there's different degrees. So a type 1 could be somebody like your height, but they'll break more of their fingers, their toes, and have those type of fractures, but they won't be diagnosed right away. So when they're a baby, if a parent picks up the child the wrong way, not intentionally, but just, and they fracture, what can happen is their parents are accused of child abuse. Because they go to the emergency room with the baby and they'll say, how did this happen? The parents say, we don't know. And so then child protection gets involved. Some parents have had to go to jail because of it, and they've had to prove, medically. Now there are cases that obviously are child abuse, so you can't assume that every child abuse case that comes in, but at the same time, it's frustrating for those families, and it's still happening today. So it's hard to educate, but the OI Foundation is doing a lot to try and educate as many people, and not just have it be a 4-sentence, little blurb in a textbook that the students read.
Any questions from the Zoom participants? Looks like
Well, I don't have a question that I can think of right now. This is Lee, Susie. I just want to say to you that, and to the others, that Susie has been an inspiration to our family for years. And as you've been talking, Susie, I've been taking notes to pass along to Paige and Lily, because Lily is now 9. She's going to be going to Canterbury next year. I lay awake last night thinking, what would happen if something happened to Paige? There wasn't going to be a godmother available if that in that event. It's not now. And so I'm almost panicking in the middle of the night. But I've written down a number of things that I have learned through what you said that have given me encouragement today to pass along to Paige. So once again, your inspiration and wisdom and your ability to convey that just continues. So we're very grateful to you, and I want to thank you a lot.
Thank you, Lee. Paige is wonderful. I like being with Paige and Lily.
Susie, I love your spirit.
Thank
I
you.
love your joy, and you are an inspiration to all of us. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I was gonna use the same word, Henry, as an inspiration. Let me tell you, anytime I feel remotely likely to feel sorry for myself with multiple myeloma, all I have to do is think about you, and it automatically makes me feel better.
Well, thank you.
Ditto.
Yeah.
And
Bill-
thank you for.
Oh, Alan Craig has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Alan.
This should be a documentary for us to help other people. This is remarkable, this story of getting, being very, very active and productive of handicapped. I think it's wonderful.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Can't give up.
Bill, hey, Bill, listen, this is Lee. If I could say one more thing, and I don't know if Bill has gone out of the room right now. I wanted to say that the red door, each time it comes out, is terrific. But the May issue, I thought was just especially so. It was creative and just tons of new stuff in there that are a resource for everybody in the church. I know it's not just Bill or Sue, it's just lots of other people, but the church has just done a great job with that. So I wanted to say that, and then I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
I also wanted to thank you for sharing all the lessons you've learned from being your own advocate, but sharing that with everybody else. And I'm wondering, I presume all that's been made available to Wendy, and that can be shared periodically, perhaps in the red door, or somehow shared
Sure.
with the congregation.
Yeah, I had flyers put together, but I didn't know if you all wanted it, but I'd be happy to email you. I did put together it's a one-page thing that shows the medications and different highlights and different websites on the other side. I'd be happy to email that to any of you that are interested.
Super.
And I can email it to Sue and Susan in the office, and they
And
can
Wendy,
have it on file.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
Wendy.
if you do that, send it to them, and because Susan has the complete mailing list, and she can just send it out to even some of those who weren't here today. So.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
But I'm just curious, you made this same or similar presentation at the community house some time ago, did you not?
Yes.
And I presume that did you have any particular feedback from that?
A lot of them had never heard of OI, so it was an awareness,
Uh-huh.
more of awareness thing, which is good. And I did forget to mention that I do work part-time for Players Circle Theater. So I'm involved with that as well as Ding Darling, and then obviously all my activity here at St. Michael's. So by talking about all the different areas of where I worked, that's also helped bring about awareness to the different organizations that they didn't know about. Like they didn't know about Players Circle, and some of them had never really been to Ding.